First item of business is the approval of the official agenda.
Mr. Mayor and Board, I would recommend that we simply swap Roman numeral 5 and 6 to have public appearances before we have general citizen comments, and take it in that particular order since we have a number of public appearances.
What is it that you were proposing before public citizens' comments?
Roman numeral 6, have the public appearances before the general citizen comments, since we've got a number of public appearances. Just swap the order.
Just swap this order right here.
Correct.
Okay. Do all of you understand what he's referring to?
Mr. Mayor, I move that the agenda be approved with that request, please, sir. Second.
We have a motion and a second that we swap the public appearances before the citizens' comment. We have a motion with a second. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. The next item is comment from the mayor and the Board of Aldermen. This evening, we have a proclamation, and if we have our military representatives here this evening, that I would like to read a proclamation for our military. Y'all will step up here, and gentlemen, and this is Appreciation Day of the 2nd Battalion of the 114th Field Artillery. The mayor of the city of Starkville, Mississippi hereby has determined that it is proper this day to welcome home and recognize the headquarters battalion, 2nd Battalion, 114th Field Artillery, 155th Brigade Combat Team, in that they have proved loyal and dedicated service to their country and community. Whereas the city of Starkville welcomes home the headquarters and headquarters batteries 2 Battalion, 114th Field Artillery, 155th Brigadier Combat Team. Whereas the city of Starkville recognizes, under the guidance, leadership, and diligence of the headquarters and the headquarters batteries 2 Battalion, 114th Field Artillery, and the 155th Brigade Combat Team for their diligent service to their community, state, and country, with service in Iraq from July 04 through January 2006. Whereas the headquarters and headquarters batteries 2 Battalion, 114th Field Artillery of the 155th Brigade Combat Team have served for the betterment of their country as citizens of Starkville, and now I therefore, Robert D. Camp, Mayor of the City of Starkville, Mississippi, do hereby proudly proclaim March the 7th, 2006 as the 2nd Battalion, 114th Field Artillery Appreciation Day. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your diligence and your support. The next item on our list is the approval of the minutes of the City of Starkville Board of Aldermen meetings of September 12th, 2005.
Mayor, I'd move approval of those minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion with a second to approve those minutes. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval, please show by raising your hand. Thank you. This brings us in order to have our public appearances that we've moved before the citizen comment. And the very first person on this public appearance is Steve Langston.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. Talking with John David Cole, who's president of the Student Association, we'd like to do more in town to show university ties and university support. And something that we've come up with is making us a stencil that we could paint the standard M-State logo at our Main Street intersections. This would be each of the intersections that actually forms a four-way, because that gives you a center spot to put the emblem. A three-way doesn't really interrupt the two lanes, so, but we would be doing probably, I can't remember, 8 or 9 intersections in downtown, and we wanted to ask permission of the city to do that. The stencil, the asphalt, of course, is black, and the stencil would require just white paint. And we thought it would be a great way of showing our visitors as well as our residents and university people how much we support the university. We're trying diligently to obtain permission, obtain the stencil and the supplies, and get this done by Bulldog Weekend. I don't know if that's going to be entirely possible, but we're trying, but it would be done certainly at that time or soon thereafter. Any questions that I might could answer about that?
Do you have a cost in mind?
I have one in mind, but some of the details have not come through. We've tried diligently. We first thought we might could make this stencil locally, then the engineer, Bill Webb, is helping us by dealing with one of the stencil companies that the city normally deals with, and we have not gotten that cost back. But we are prepared to raise these funds to do this if the city might have some painting personnel that are used to doing the handicap signs, or perhaps some parking. We would, some in-kind service would be requested, but at this particular point in time, we think the cost will be minimal, if any, to the city.
As long as they don't get the Carolina blue with the handicap things confused with the white Mississippi State, we might be able to safely buy with people to do that.
Steve, the intention would be to put down permanent paint as opposed to temporary paint?
Yes, we were thinking we would use the same quality white paint that's typically used for parking spaces or stripes. It's a rather thick paint. We would, of course, test the stencil first to be sure we get a good result. We want it to look good. We want it to be very readable. The stencil is proposed to be 8 by 8 feet. Our drawback is 6 by 6 if they can't do it, or there's something prohibitive about that size. But if you can picture those intersections, most of the intersections we're talking about have turn lanes. So there's quite a sizable space in the center of those intersections.
And Steve, you were recommending that we have one stencil at that intersection, or
We are recommending one large stencil. We have decided that we would face them on one street in one direction and other streets in other directions. We looked at doing smaller stencils in each lane that you would be traveling down, but it looked like it was going to get confusing, and that puts it in the traffic lane. We felt like the durability would not be, it wouldn't be as long lasting. We want it to look good. And we think if we, on the four-way streets like that, if we put it in the center, the turn vehicles would run over it some probably, but otherwise it would be relatively, traffic-free maybe.
thank you.
Any questions? I hope y'all would give us permission to try these, and hopefully it'll be a great look for our residents and visitors. Let me make a motion.
No. Why don't you help us get a cost estimate on this thing, and we
Okay.
maybe can, if
We had
come
hoped
forward
that,
maybe on March, the second meeting of this month,
Okay.
maybe we can go from there.
I apologize, and we fully had intended to have that by today's meeting, but some unforeseen situations caused us not to have it. But we do expect it to be minimal cost, if any, to the city.
Concept is outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is a presentation request by Bill Henry regarding construction of a bridge on Lindbergh.
Mayor, Board,
How you doing?
I'm just requesting permission to construct a bridge across the paved ditch at Lindbergh, and it would meet city approval, and I'll pay for it. The reason being to access the traffic back up on the Highway 12.
Is our city engineer here?
Yes,
Have you had an opportunity to look at this?
I've looked at the, it's shown no plans yet, I looked at the location he wants to do it. I see no problem with it as long as it meets the capacity for both the vehicle and traffic over it and the water volume under it.
Is this something you're willing to say, be out-of-pocket expense yourself to meet these requirements as
Yes.
such? Any questions from board member?
Other than just, I'd just like to have a little bit of time to talk to some of my constituents down there about this, just because this will be the first time they've heard about this, and I'd just like to have a little bit of time, so if we could just take this under advisement this evening, and bring it back, place it on the agenda for our next meeting in March, I would love that opportunity.
Just for clarification, Mr. Hammond, the location of your property on Lindbergh is right at the intersection of Highway 12 and Lindbergh.
Right.
And one of the things that, in your conversations with Mr. Webb has been that the thought process is that if you're allowed that intersection earlier on Lindbergh, that potentially the commercial traffic would not have to progress further down that residential street for the first turnaround if you're able to have it at your property. And that's what sounded, that was one of the benefits that you saw both for your potential business or customers there as well as for the community.
Right.
Mr. Rummel, is this something the planning department or
We have been requested to look into it.
to take a look at it? and
It's
maybe-
primarily a transportation issue, and it would fit within the C2 designation Atkins on both sides of it. And as Mr. Cox said, this would get keep the traffic out of a residential area. And I really basically see no problem with it.
Is this something that planning and zoning should take a look at?
We can take it up there, no problem. Here again, building a bridge over a city-owned piece of property, I don't know whether we could possibly do a public hearing on it if need be, to that effect. But here again, we are under the aegis of the State Highway Department as well as the Streets Department. So it becomes more of a transportation issue than it does a land use issue.
Bottom line, is this something that planning and zoning needs to look at?
No, not really.
Okay.
And I think I understood Mr. Davis to say that, and this is his ward, and I think it's important that.
I'd just
the
like a little time
opportunity-
to, like I said, to talk to some of my constituents that live in the immediately adjacent areas, particularly since this will probably, for most of them, be the first, or for all of them, be the first time they've heard about this, and rather than take action tonight, I'd at least like us to just delay just 2 weeks, but, so we could talk to them a little bit.
Can you come up with a drawing of a bridge between now and then?
I'm gonna have to get with, Mr. Webb, see what he's gonna require.
I would suggest you get with him very quickly, see if we can't get something resolved for the next 2 weeks. And I think that where he's coming from, he'd like to see some picture of what is proposed to be built there.
How close is it to the highway? How close is it to the next bridge? Does the State Department of Transportation have any issues here? I don't know.
We'd kind of like to find out some of those issues as such like that. We don't think we're being unfair to you, but I think those are very good questions. And is it, you think it's possible for you to get with Mr. Webb and say, come up with something within the next couple of weeks?
Oh, yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank y'all.
This brings us to the representative of the Colonial Hill Subdivision Homeowners Association.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Larson, and I live in Colonial Hills on 202 Williamsburg Drive, and I'm here to represent the Homeowners Association. Basically, we just would like to say that the Colonial Hills residents do still firmly support the issues that were voiced in the meeting, the last Board of Aldermen meeting, In short, we still support a 35-foot buffer or a setback and would like it to contain vegetation that will provide a year-round screen so that the sanctity and the privacy of the neighborhoods involved are protected. Citizens in Starkville really look to you, the Board of Aldermen, to make sure that development that goes into town maintains a quality of life for all the residents. We feel that it's very important that the developers, that the citizens and the residents of areas impacted by the development and the city, that we all work together to ensure quality of life issues in Starkville. We all have the same goal, and that goal is to make Starkville a great place to live and a great place to prosper and make money. And so we think that if we all work together, we can continue to accomplish that goal to make Starkville a great place to live. We thank you for your consideration of the issues and for the time and thought that you've taken in all of these issues that have come up lately. And we thank you for the job that you do every day.
Ma'am, you say you live on Williamsburg.
I do. 202 Williamsburg.
Thanks for coming back again. I know, or at least I understand, that there's been some work between the homeowners association that you represent as well as the developer. Have you seen the compromise that's been proposed, and do y'all have a position on that compromise?
If it's the one that I saw this morning, we support it.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Representative Huntington Park.
Mr. Mayor, Board of Aldermen, up until a few days ago, I said there was no need for me to appear back before this board because I think everything had been said at our last meeting dealing with the facts. All of you know the facts of this occurrence here, and I don't think there's any question in any of your mind about what has already occurred. Then the reason I'm here, I simply asked the question, why are we here? I believe this meeting is about integrity. I think this meeting is about protecting the integrity of our subdivisions, about the people that's sitting behind me having a voice in protecting the integrity of their subdivisions. Many of you, just a few short months ago, made public statements in your campaign rhetoric that this is one of the things you were very much interested in, is protecting the integrity of the subdivisions of Starkville. I think another reason this is about integrity, this is about integrity of Starkville city government. People sitting behind me want to ensure that you follow the procedures, that your decisions are based on facts and statements made before you in this meeting. So I think our meeting tonight very much is about integrity and not about some of the other minor issues. I truly hope that for the good of the residents of the city of Starkville, that the decisions you make tonight and the decisions you make in the future will be based entirely upon fact and upon what is presented to you in your meetings here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. And I assume that I'll ask you the same question that Matt asked the previous person. Are you in agreement with this term and item that was worked out with Belmont?
I only saw it a short period of time ago, and at that time I do not have any disagreement with it.
Okay, thank you, sir. The representative of Timber Cove subdivision. Larry, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fine.
Looks like we've been facing off each other about 40-something years.
That's right, that's right. Let's hope we don't have to face off too long tonight. I'm Larry Graves. I live at 108 Shadowwood Lane.
in the Timber Cove subdivision, and we are here, Timber Cove residents are here to support Huntington Park and Colonial Hills residents in their issue with the Belmont Park matter. We feel together as neighborhoods that either we all stand together or we'll all fall apart. But at the last meeting of this board, everybody heard unrefutable evidence that the previous board had approved the preliminary plat for Belmont Park, including a 35-foot buffer. Mayor, we had earlier in that meeting heard you respond to Dr. Roy Ruby in that this thing had been passed by the previous board as if it did not apply today. Anything that previous board passed, or anything that this board passed, stands until it is repealed by due process. So the people of Starkville, major neighborhoods here, trust that in your decision on this matter that you will uphold what has been previously passed. And I have not seen the compromise. I've talked to some folks that have. We would stand with them in their approval of this compromise. Thank you very much.
You have mine. I read this. Thank you. That brings us down to board business.
Citizens comment.
Do you want to have a citizen?
No, they will come next if they are.
Oh, okay. We may have some citizen comments. Do we have citizens here that would like to comment? Go ahead.
I'm Corey Langston, and I live at 204 Williamsburg in Colonial Hills, so it will be no surprise that I'm talking about the Belmont Park buffer zone issue, and I will try to be brief. I know you don't want redundancy. There are two major points that I wanted to make. One has to do with exactly why we're so adamant about this buffer zone, and that's really because I think some of this got lost in the discussion last time. It's the elevation of the lot by comparison. Where normally a 6-foot fence with some shrubs would suffice between neighbors. I went out the other night and used a laser level from my deck and shot to a pole on the property line, and that's a 16.5-foot difference in elevation. In order to block my view from my future neighbor, I'm going to have a 17-foot fence or greater. Now, the natural vegetation we had when the true buffer existed was fine. It was high, it was low, and it obscured things. But now that the majority of that's been cleared, it doesn't exist. So what we're asking for is a restoration of some form of tall vegetative border. The second point has to do with, I certainly agree it is the prerogative of any new board to change the ruling of a previous board. But I would argue that that should only be done in the direst of circumstances, such as when that board has made a grievous error, or that the circumstances of the original decision really no longer apply. I think when you start changing prior decisions of other boards, you not only erode the confidence of the people in the government, but more importantly from the homeowner standpoint, it decreases the ability of that homeowner to really make long-range plans and have confidence in those plans for his household. So I'll stop there and just say that our neighborhood does strongly believe in the rights to preserve the privacy and integrity of subdivisions and homeowners, and we're depending on you as the Board of Aldermen to help protect our property values and our quality of life. And yes, I do agree, if it goes through as proposed, that a compromise would be appropriate.
Thank you.
Mr. Langston, do you live on the portion of Williamsburg that's on the back end, near the back end of the Belmont Park subdivision where it is in?
Yes. Yeah. Now that it's cleared, I can look straight through to the road.
Right. The reason I asked that, I went down today to take an on-site view and observation of the premises. That's why I wanted to be sure. Is that the location?
That's the location.
Other citizens that would like to make a comment?
Good evening.
I'm Gary Cole, I live at 104 Dunville Drive, and I support everything that has been said, but that is not why I'm up here speaking. I'm up here speaking because I see on tonight's agenda that Mr. Perkins has made a proposal for consideration of a popular referendum concerning the location, combination, and financing of the municipal complex. Mr. Perkins, I fully support you in this, and I hope that the majority of this board will support you. Many of you, including the mayor, had in their campaign promises that there would be referendum on the site selection and where it would go. I want to conclude by a quote. The quote is, "Citizens' voices have been ignored by our current city officials. I promise that people's voices will be heard." Where was that quote taken from? It was taken from a letter entitled "Starkville Can Be Great, a message from Dan Camp." Thank you.
You're right, but I never said that we would have a popular vote on the location. Thank you.
You try to force a referendum on the location.
I did not try to force a referendum on the location. I tried to force a referendum on the money. Anyone else? How you doing tonight, Mr. Dirk?
Good evening to the mayor and board of aldermen. Citizens, we had faith that, and it was quoted in the campaign, that you all could work with the mayor. But we are very hesitant that the mayor tried his best, but he's catching. Working together, you get things done. Working apart, you lose the trust of the people. Actions speak louder than words. July will mark year one. We would like to see something done. It will make us feel better, because after July 1, we got 3 more years, and we would like to see a lot of what was said make us feel better from the taxpayers' point of view. With the electricity going up, the people would like to have them to consider. We have a lot of people on life support in Austin, and those are some sons of the citizens.
Thank you, sir. Any other citizen comments?
Thank you. I'm Ann Mitchell, and I was asked to represent the Greater Starkville Development Partnership in publicly stating to you what we said in letters to you earlier, to the mayor and the aldermen, about the support of the partnership for the improvement and the thoughts of focusing public facilities in the downtown area, and how much we as a board approve of your interest in doing that and applaud you and send our unanimous support for the location of those buildings in the downtown area. We're very pleased as a partnership to be moving our offices and our facilities back downtown, and we look forward to being neighbors with what you present and approve and move forward with to have some first-class public facilities for our city that really represent us well. We would pledge our support for moving forward on this and getting it done in whatever most appropriate way is determined, and you can count on the support of the partnership for whatever's necessary to make it happen. and we appreciate what you're doing for our community, and we're, as our friend just said, we're feeling good about what's happening in Starkville, and we're pleased with what you're moving forward with, and we wanted to publicly state our support for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments?
Mayor? I'm Steve Langston. I wanted to speak to you about that same issue. We have 3 departments that I don't think anyone disagrees with needs adequate facilities, and they need them now. We've been going through this process for a long time, and great diligence has been spent on the possible locations of these facilities. I do think that you have adopted from the last work session the study that was done and brought forward by the architects, and you have adopted the basic criteria of that, mainly dealing with adequate space not only now but in the future. I think it's a 20-year projected increase. I do think the new plan that was recently presented offers all of those capabilities. I believe the architect even spoke to it at the work session that with the new plan of splitting the 2 facilities, which is preferred by at least the court, makes it an entirely different idea. All of a sudden, the spots that didn't work before become viable spots now, not only for adequate present, but plenty of future growth. And it's in an area where I feel like a lot of the citizenry have already voiced their opinions. I think one of the very 2 most major issues in our past campaign was probably dealing with this municipal complex. We have researched it, and I think this board has done very good due diligence in further researching the project since they've been in place. So I think that you have the necessary tools, I think you have the necessary input to go ahead and make a decision on the site, and then we can move forward immediately with final construction plans and bids, and work could actually begin, because the downtown proposal that has been most recently put forward, and all communities are trying to rebuild their public facilities in downtowns, even those that have spread out are trying to come back. I think we've learned so much in the past 2 years. But these are sites that work could begin on immediately. And these 3 agencies, these 3 departments, they need some relief in as soon a time as is possible. So I would like to encourage you to take a look at the new plan, and I believe that you would see that it meets all the criteria, and then let's move forward with it, and let's get the budgets worked out and the referendum on the budget and whatever it takes to get that done. I really feel like the facilities could be adequately planned and built without even that, but I know there were some promises about the money end of the thing. Could I answer any questions anybody might have? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else that would like to speak on any matter pertaining to gun comfort in the city or city business or any issue? Okay, we will now go into board business. Mr. Lauren, I believe you have 2 items here, or 3 items. Will be the next item.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm giving you an additional copy of the resolution that was introduced at an earlier meeting dealing with clarification of the minutes of March 15, 2005 relative to the development of Belmont subdivision. I made a full presentation at an earlier meeting. You listened to the tape of the meeting. You received and have before you the signed certification of major city officials about what occurred at that particular meeting. And so tonight I would simply like to offer for your consideration the nunc pro tunc order clarifying the minutes of March 15, 2005, and I would move its adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the adoption?
Mr. Mayor, let me just say very briefly that I've given this matter a lot of thought and consideration, and I certainly want to be fair and impartial to all parties involved. I've spent the time, that's why I asked Mr. Langston about where he lives. I was out at the location during the 12 o'clock hour today, and I went down to Belmont Park subdivision in Williamsburg, and just want to make sure I have hands-on approach regarding this matter. And I've carefully reviewed the tape on this matter, and, you know, and the tape is what's controlling. You know, we listened to the tape at the last meeting, and the tape was very clear. And as I listened to it very carefully, a colleague from Ward 3, in all fairness, really quizzed the gentleman, Mr. Pepper, who was the agent and official representative from Pritchard Engineering. He was representing the developer, Mr. White, and Mr. McLaurin was very careful about answering him about that buffer. And the language that came out from that discussion was that everything in dark green would remain, and there will be 35 feet of buffer. Now, it's very clear that there was simple reliance by the board when it considered that motion and before it voted on that motion, because the tape makes it really clear that there was very detrimental reliance on the fact that those things would remain. You know, you can feel it in the tape, and that's what is there. Whenever a developer makes a representation by himself individually and/or by and through his agent or representative in any capacity, and that person is bound by that. He's bound by the actions. He's bound by the conduct. And I'm saying all that for the record to make it real clear that, you know, that I'm going to have to support this motion on the floor tonight because that's the fairest thing to do. Of course, if that assertion was not a part of the tape, then we have a different issue. And so this order here, resolution, is basically make clear and clarify the action of the board that took place on March 15, 2005. And I wanted to say that and spend the time with this to let the parties involved know that I want to be fair, I want to be impartial. So the board is duty bound to make sure that we enforce the actions that it approves. So in light of the fact that there was detrimental reliance by the board and the representation was made, then the developer is bound by that. So that's just the bottom line. I mean, that's the way it is. It doesn't matter whether there is a requirement in city ordinance that there is no buffer between residential neighborhoods. The question is what was the representation that was made? And we all know what the representation was. So legally, I'm comfortable with it. And of course, I'm voting for this motion, and I just want to make that clear for the record. And I feel very good about it. I think that's the fairest and correct thing to do. And I yield the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Matt, can you explain what the Latin terms mean to the audience?
Nunc pro tunc is simply saying now for then. It's a clarification of something that occurred in the past being done now.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion?
Call for the question.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. It's 100%. Thank you.
Good.
Go to the next item.
Having now done that, I have what I think will be good news for everybody concerned. I want to start off by commending the developer, Mr. Carlos White, by commending his engineer, Mr. Pritchard, and by commending the residents of Colonial Hills subdivision, Huntington Park subdivision, and by support Timber Cove subdivision about getting together, wanting to get together to see if we could work out a solution to the issue that had been raised. Since the last meeting, there have been a flurry of phone calls, meetings, conversations, back and forth suggestions, going as late as 10:30 last night and continuing into today by way of email and telephone and so forth. I'm very, very pleased to report that the affected residents of particularly Colonial Hills subdivision, to a lesser extent Huntington Park subdivision, with the developer's representative, Mr. Pritchett, conferring, of course, with the developer, have come up with what we think is a good solution and compromise to the 35-foot buffer matter that has generated such discussion for the last several weeks. As maybe Dee Dee said, I can't remember which of the speakers said it, that what really could be better if you have a development that is going to occur, and we all want development to occur, that particular developer get with the people surrounding that development to talk about what is going to go on, what's going to happen, how, when, why, all this type of thing, so that everyone has a comfort level and a level of trust, each with the other. That getting together, certainly in my opinion, should be facilitated by the city and its various officials. Probably past due in this matter, but nevertheless here, we finally, as of about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock or so, this afternoon, still with a few straggling in as late as 4:30 this afternoon, reached what we think is a very, very good proposal for to allow immediate development of Bellwood subdivision with protection of the homeowners that surround the perimeter of the subdivision in Colonial Hills and in Huntington Park. Let me give to each of you a written copy of the motion that it will be my pleasure to offer in just a moment. Mr. White and Mr. Pritchett have brought some modified, refined, altered plats of the subdivision, or at least some of the language and representations on the plat of the subdivision. And let me pass this out. If I don't know how many we got here, but let's see what we can look on. Mayor, if you'll hold that, we'll share.
Pass that on there.
Just drop down there. We got enough. Yeah, we got enough. Share this. And again, I think that this shows what can be accomplished if people will simply talk together and do it earlier than we did in this particular matter. So there comes for consideration tonight, the next item on your agenda, approval of the final plat of Belmont subdivision. The developer, Carlos White, acting through his representative, Pritchett Engineering, having met with representatives of Colonial Hills subdivision, Huntington Park subdivision, and agreed upon certain terms for development of certain aspects of said subdivision. So it is my pleasure tonight to move adoption of the final plat of Belmont, we're still calling it Belmont Park subdivision, subject to the following terms and conditions which have been agreed upon between the developer through his representative and the affected residents of Colonial Hills and Huntington Park. The following representations as acceptable terms and conditions, which I am conditioning this motion for approval of the final plat. First, the 35-foot setback around the perimeter of the lots will remain undisturbed until a building permit is issued, of course, for each of the lots. 2, new plantings will be established within the 35-foot rear setback portion of those lots on which grubbing has been performed. The clearing that Alderman Perkins was talking about that he viewed this afternoon. Weather permitting, these plantings will be performed within 30 days of approval of this final plat. At planting, the trees and/or shrubs, inclusive of evergreens, will be a minimum of 3 gallons in size and a variety which will reach a mature height of at least 20 feet and sufficient in number and spacing to screen the property. The definition of screen is found in point number 4, which I'll read in just a minute. Mature trees within the 35-foot rear setback of the subdivision lots will remain. Mature trees shall be defined as a desirable hardwood or evergreen species having a diameter of 6 inches or greater. Exception is provided where the location of said trees conflicts with the desired location of man-made walls or fences intended to accomplish screening. Number 4, screening within the rear setback of the subdivision lot shall be accomplished within 6 months of occupancy of the home constructed on each lot. Screening is defined as a method by which a view of one property is shielded, obscured, or hidden by trees and/or hedges, providing a dense, year-round vegetative barrier. Fences, walls, or berms may be used in addition to, but not instead of, the vegetative barrier. And then finally, number 5, which is something the residents of Colonial Hills came up with, which adds to, I think, Mr. White's development of his property and individual choice and freedom of whoever buys the lots to do things like they would like to do it. And so they said, this ought to be added too, and I agree. Future landowners may alter an established screen provided it meets the above criteria. You had a landowner that didn't like a whatever you had, but wanted to put something else that met the definition of screening, fine, let him do it. His land, his choice. Each of these 5 notations will be clearly indicated on the final plat, which it appears that they have been, and echoed in the restrictive covenants for Belmont Park subdivision. Said restricted covenants to be referenced in the deeds issued for the conveyance of each individual lot. So, something that the developer, his representative, the citizens of Colonial Hills, Huntington Park, worked out after much discussion, and as I said, it's my pleasure to offer the motion for approval of Belmont Park subdivision final plat, subject to those 5 agreed terms.
Second. Motion with a second. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Passes. I think the vegetation is not grown back.
Oh, well, Mayor, you can ask the Vice Mayor about that. He viewed it this afternoon. Again, Mr. White, Mr. Pritchett, citizens of the subdivisions, thank you for getting together and doing this.
Mr. Mills would like to make a statement before everybody just left.
Yes,
Mills?
I'd like to make a statement, that I feel that we've done a good thing tonight by compromising. But at the same time, we have people from that area that for some reason get an enjoyment out of criticizing the people that ran for this office to be aldermen. And on the Justice Complex and the court room and so forth, we have diligently worked trying to refuse something for the city of Starkville. And maybe the people here do not understand why that we haven't accomplished a whole lot. It's a whereby, and I'll assume responsibility as such, when you get to the point where you can't get 2 or 3 people to agree out of 7, it's hard to move on with something constructive. And I'd just like to say that I'd like for you people, you come up here and showed a great interest in a project that you were very much interested in. And I'd like to see some of you people coming back to these board meetings and see what goes on here. And you might get a more intelligent background of what this board is trying to accomplish. Thank you, and I welcome each one of you back to the next board meeting.
We will take a 5-minute recess here. Thank you.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your health care needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in health care.
Let's see, we're all here. I declare the recess over with. We'll move on with our agenda. The next item is consideration of a popular referendum. This is Roy Perkins. Roy?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, the Alderman from Ward 6 requested for this matter to be on the agenda, and I'm fixing to make a motion. I'm going to pass the motion on down so each one of you can have it, and I'll make the motion as soon as it reaches the end of the table.
Gosh, Roy, this is a multitude of motions. So
It's just one. We'll read it, and we'll see where it goes. Alderman Dash, you have a comment?
No, you can go ahead.
No, I'll wait till you.
Thank you, Roy.
Mr. Mayor, may I proceed?
you may.
Mr. Mayor, this is an order calling for a non-binding referendum to determine the public will concerning the location, configuration, and financing of a police department and a municipal court facility. I'd like to offer the following motion, Mr. Mayor, that provides and states as follows. Whereas pursuant to Section 21-17-5 of the Mississippi Code of 1972 as amended, municipalities have the authority to conduct non-binding referendum at any time to determine the public will on matters of significance within the jurisdiction of the municipality, and whereas the Attorney General of the State of Mississippi has opinion number 2003-0038 dated 1/31/2003 to Beckett, that the municipal governing authorities may initiate a referendum process by order or resolution spread upon the minutes of municipality. And whereas the location, configuration, and financing of a police department and municipal court facility have been much debated for a number of months and are a matter of significance within the jurisdiction of the municipality, and whereas the appropriation of public funds for conducting such a referendum on the location, configuration, and financing of a police department and a municipal court facility is in the best interest of the city of Starkville. As I said earlier, I'm offering this as a motion and expecting to get a second, that the city of Starkville call a non-binding referendum to determine the public will on the location, configuration, and financing of a police department and a municipal court facility to be held on May 16, 2006. That said non-binding referendum be limited to the registered voters within the corporate limits of the municipality. That said non-binding referendum be conducted by the Municipal Election Commission, assisted by personnel in the office of the city clerk, and that the ballot for said non-binding referendum contain a number of categories and propositions that said voters choose one of the propositions as their preference in each category. said proposition being structured in substantially the following form. Non-binding referendum ballot concerning the location, configuration, and financing of a police department and municipal court facility. Category 1, location of a police department facility. Vote for one proposition. Proposition number 1, location of a police department facility at the former Millsaps Automobile Dealership on Lampkin Street. Estimated property acquisition cost of blank. Estimated construction cost of blank. Proposition number 2, location of a police department facility on the former Coca-Cola bottling plant site on Mississippi Highway 12. Estimated property acquisition of blank. Estimated construction cost of blank. Proposition number 3, location of a police department facility on the Stark property on Hospital Road Extended. Estimated property acquisition cost of $0. The property owner is willing to donate acreage for a police department and a proposed new fire station if the city constructs 2 streets proposed in the city's comprehensive plan at an estimated cost of blank dollars. Estimated construction cost of blank. Category number 2, municipal court facility. Vote for one proposition. Proposition 1, the municipal court facility should be constructed in a separate building on the same site as the police department facility. Proposition 2, the municipal court facility should be constructed in a separate building on a different site from the police department facility. And I offer this in the form of a motion, and that the appropriate staff of the city of Starkville will fill in the dollar amounts that's shown on this particular order. And that is so moved in the form of a motion, calling for a non-binding referendum.
Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, if I might,
You may.
this appears to be a classic bait and switch. This was the primary issue of the last election, and at the first board meeting, July 5th, 2005, this board spoke unanimously that we would call a bond referendum on the Justice Complex. It is a settled issue. It's in our approved minutes. And we in fact reaffirmed that unanimous vote again unanimously for a bond referendum on July 19th. This motion is to in essence exchange a binding bond referendum for a watered-down opinion poll. In my opinion, at a time when the community, the citizens of Starkville, are expecting leadership and progress, we're getting the tactics of basically of a used car salesman. This is bait and switch. We have a binding bond referendum already approved by this board. We should stick with that. We need to move forward. This board has made so much progress on this Justice Complex. In just the last few months, we've agreed on a program. We've understood the requirements of both our court and our police department. We've now heard a presentation just this past week on some very favorable locations downtown. I, of course, will be voting against this motion. I would encourage my colleagues to not allow this bait and switch to happen.
Mr. Mayor, if I may have the floor, please, sir.
You may.
Alderman Cox is 100% correct when he says that we voted unanimously that we would hold a binding referendum on any bonds issued for this project. There's no doubt about that. Now, in order for us to pass that bond issue at referendum, we must have 60% plus one voter of those who show up on election day vote favorably for that issue. Now, that brings us back to what Alderman Perkins has proposed this evening in this way. There is a lot of contention on this issue, location being one of the most contentious, probably the driving force behind a lot of statements that were made in the last administration And in my mind, unless we settle the issue of location first and do it in such a way that no one side can say that the mayor and the Board of Aldermen are trying to pick a specific location and force it upon me as the voting public, we will be unsuccessful when we do go to our binding referendum on the bond issues. This in no way says we're not going to vote on the bond issue. It is not a quote-unquote bait-and-switch effort on anyone's part. I represent people that are vehemently in favor of a downtown location for these facilities. I also represent people who feel that the downtown location is not in the best interest of these facilities. I've heard from both sides of these that if this board, this administration picks one or the other, they're going to go vote against our bond issue. Now, what I'd like to see us do is build a facility, as Mr. Langston said earlier, desperately needed for both court and police, and I assume you're throwing in the electric department as well. But what I want to see us do is build this facility and move about our business as quickly as possible. Now, to build the facility, we've got to pass the bond issue referendum to have our money. So I go back to the fact that I've had people on both sides of this issue say, if you put it here, I'm voting against your bond issue referendum. Not gonna vote to spend the money there, and vice versa. Now, in my mind, I think this is a way for us to put out accurate information and allow the people to truly finally, with finality, express their opinion on the location issue so we can get past that and we can move on, and move on in a very timely manner. I support this motion for those reasons. It's not a motion that's condemning one site or promoting one site. It's simply saying we want to put this issue to bed and show that that we as an administration are not trying to force one site or the other upon anyone. This is the will of the majority of the people. And I understand that people are going to say, well, the last election, this was one of the major issues. But I would argue that when we come time to vote on our bond issue, it would be better to do everything we can to ensure its passage so that we can build these needed facilities. If you want to think about it in this way, think about this as the first step in our public campaign to pass our bond issue election. To get the people involved and understand exactly what it is they're going to the polls to vote on, to pass a tax increase on themselves. Because we've got to start moving on with this issue. And I do support this for that reason. And I yield the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Next man speak. Just a couple of questions. If we get to the specifics of the motion that, of course, none of the aldermen saw before it was presented to us here tonight, we have a proposition to put on a non-binding opinion poll on May 16th, including a location that this board has not considered. We have no details, we have no appraisal. I don't know how it's conceivable that we're now putting out a new location that we've never discussed for bond referendum. That just seems illogical to me, unless there was another reason why we wanted to put an additional site on there, perhaps to benefit or favor a different site. And then under category 2, we're going to ask the people to vote on whether the facilities should be put together or separate. I mean, it seems like I need to amend this and put a category 3 for the color of the building. At some point, there needs to be some leadership here. We've heard from our judge, who apparently was ignored for over 3 years, who said that he would prefer an independent court facility. We've heard from our police chief about his needs. At some point, people are expecting some leadership from this board and not to turn over some basic issues that we should be that we should be managing, and I believe we've had significant progress on this, and that's why I'm shocked and surprised by such an effort to halt that progress. I would like to know what cost this referendum is going to incur to the city, and I'd certainly like to understand what additional costs are going to be needed for additional assessments by the architect. We're at $250,000 and counting to do 2 additional feasibility studies, assuming that this is our desire to educate the public. That would require, based on previous cost estimates, another $40,000 for a non-binding public opinion poll. I yield the floor, sir.
Mayor, I'm thinking back to when I was running for office, because this is probably one of the most important decisions this board will make in this term. It absolutely is, in my opinion. And I think back to when we had our debates and we made our public statements, and I very much supported having a referendum on the bond issue because I thought that was important, and that's what it seemed like a lot of the public wanted. I was asked about location, and I remember saying that first and foremost, this building needed to be built. That was the most important thing, because what we have now just is not sufficient. It's in fact, it's a little embarrassing. It's not meeting the needs of the city. So most important is that we get this done and we get it built. However, when I was asked, do I prefer downtown or elsewhere, I said downtown. And I said if it could feasibly be done, we should do it downtown. And at the workshop we had recently, it seemed to me that it could feasibly be done. And I made that very public statement. And so when you get into an issue of a referendum over location, I really feel as though the public had its referendum on location, at least from my ward, when they chose to elect me to office.
Mr. Mills?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on the location of the Stark property. We've been talking about this for 3 years, and there was never anything said about Stark property on the Hospital Road extension. So it's quite obvious that we have made progress down to the point whereby now we're going to inject a political issue. And this is nothing but a political interest and a interest of certain people. So I want the board to give consideration before they vote on this piece of property. At the same time, I well remember back in the last administration that we discussed the coke plant site, and every time we mentioned the coke plant site, it would not fit. Now, what has changed that all of a sudden that it will fit? We just had a presentation in a workshop where the Gary Schaefer has put in the police department on the Mill South property, and he says now that this will fit. So I think we need to give some consideration on narrowing this down to where we can bring it to a referendum where we can vote and move on and get something built. And I'll be voting against it.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, a couple of things. Mr. Mills, actually, the coke plant last time it would fit both facilities. It was land acquisition cost and some other issues as far as the property backing up to your neighborhood, and us not necessarily want to do that, but we've thrown out certain criteria that we looked at last time as far as location of schools, neighborhoods, and things of that nature. But just to address your concerns, last administration we did say both facilities would fit on that property. And you're exactly right, Mr. Schaefer has said that a police department would fit on the Millshouse property, which I agree with, it would. As far as making decisions and showing leadership, you know, if we want to do that, why don't we pick a location tonight and declare our intent to issue bonds in the amount sufficient to build the police facility on whatever location we pick tonight, and just move on. And just with rescind our previous board action and let's just declare our intent to issue some bonds. I mean, if that's what we're talking about, making decisions and showing leadership, then I've been down that road, you know? And I'm just telling y'all, when it comes time to go out and support this bond issue, we need to do everything we possibly can to eliminate possible opposition to that bond issue. Because when it comes time for the voters to actually go vote on money, that's when a lot of people are going to wake up and say, wait a minute, this is what you're doing, this is where you're going to put it? I had no idea. And I know that we feel like we've done a wonderful job of informing the public and getting the information out. But I'm telling you, if we just up and say, okay, here's where it's going to be, let's go vote on a bond issue, it's going to be extremely, extremely hard to pass it. And that's all I'm saying.
And Alderman Davis, I think your point's well taken, and I thought what we were going to achieve tonight was declaring a town hall meeting so that we could update the public on the progress that's been made, to go over the very details of this project. And that's where I thought we were on our next step, in addition to allowing the architect to complete his work that the board had already authorized on the mill. But I agree, your point's well taken, that we have to do twice as good of a job as we possibly even think we need to do on communicating this. And that's why I'm so disappointed that previously we've spoken unanimously at every step, and to spring this on us, and that, in my opinion, appears to be ill thought out, including this Coca-Cola site that we haven't discussed, including splitting the facilities, which we as a board, in that, not the workshop, but in a previous meeting, I feel like we had consensus around. I just feel like we're taking a pretty giant step back. But I agree with you, we need to do a much better job at selling this. The next step in my mind is that town hall discussion where we seek public input, and we were able to move forward.
Mr. Mayor, may I have the floor, please?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to respectfully encourage each one of my colleagues sitting at this table to vote for this motion. This matter has been before this board time after time and after time again. The city has been sued about not giving the people the right to vote. There have been petition drives where the citizens have said, Mayor and Board of Aldermen, we want to give the people the right to vote. This is what this resolution does. It gives the people the right to vote. Now, the last board, every single member, Alderman Sumner Davis from Ward 1, Alderman Frank Davis from Ward 2, Alderman McLaurin from Ward 3, Alderman Beck from Ward 4, Alderman Virgil Bowling from Ward 5, Dr. Vic Zita from Ward at Large, and Ward 6, Alderman Roy A. Perkins. We sat here. We became saturated with comments, remarks. We watched slide point presentations. We heard the media ran stories. The people want the right to vote. And now we give the people the right to vote, and we get criticized. We get ostracized. The chief of police, Mr. David Lindley, he goes out and do everything he can. He hold meetings. He hold presentations. He sit down here. He receive comments, and he get criticized. He get criticized for excluding the people. He get criticized for uninviting the people. We get criticized for uninviting the people. We need to show that we care about the people. This is leadership, citizens of Starkville. This is leadership, members of the media. This is leadership. We are leaders. That's what we're doing. This is America. I believe in democracy, and we all should support democracy. What's wrong with giving the people the right to vote? I mean, that's how we were elected. The people chose us as individual aldermen. We vote for the President of the United States, and once we elect that president, he is the President of the United States of America. And once the people choose this site, if they choose the Millsaps property, then that's what I'm going to vote to put it there. If they want this site on a separate location, I'm going to vote for it. I am tired of the criticism. I am tired of the ostracism. This is ill thought out. No. This is America. We support giving the people the right to vote. This is leadership, ladies and gentlemen. And I urge you to support this. We don't need to delay this. We need to move forward. I have sat on this board since July the 6th of 1993. And I have always supported the people's concerns. And we need to adhere to that. We need to move forward and let them take their right to vote on this issue. And I urge my colleagues to support this matter. Let's move on. And this is a very well thought out plan and written motion. And I urge that we have unanimous support on this matter. Mr. Cole's comments to us earlier, he said the people's voice will be heard. The people's voice need to be heard. Power is in the ballot box. Voting is about democracy. Voting is about input. Voting is about feedback. And we've had the town hall meetings. We've had the discussion. We sat up here late at night. We sat here very patient. I've attended all these meetings. I've heard all these meetings. So what else do we need to do, ladies and gentlemen? What else do we need to do? When I go home tonight, I'm going to sleep well because I have supported the people. I want the people to have a voice. We need to put this matter to rest, and rest once and for all. We need to let the people be heard so we won't get criticized. The people have expressed their viewpoints. And my colleague from Ward 1 said, yes, he had some people who wanted downtown. He had some people who wanted other locations. The same about my ward. I have people who have diverse views, but I do not want to put a cap or a lid or a muzzle over their mouth because they have a right to be heard, ladies and gentlemen. And I respectfully appeal to each one of my learned and distinguished colleagues at this table to please support this motion.
Would you like to say something, Mr. Mills?
Mr. Alderman Perkins, I'd like to ask you a question, and you don't even have to answer. For 3 years, I stood before this board, right here at this desk, and asked y'all, why would you not give us a right to vote as a citizen of Starkville? And every time I come before this board, the board members stood up here and stared at me like I was a fool. Now then, we have come and done a lot of work to get a location, and it's been approved by the consultant engineer. He can do this, he can do that. We've got the Millsap property. We've got a place for the courtroom. Now I'm saying let's vote on it. Let's put it on the referendum of the Millsap property and the property we've got for the courtroom and the price of obtaining it. And let's vote on that and say yes or no. That's a good right for the people to have, yes or no. Not going all over the city of Starkville, gathering up pieces of property and say, I've found another good place. And you know, we need to get away from that.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Any other?
Mr. Mayor, can we fill in the blanks based on some of these estimates?
Oh, we probably can. I have taken the liberty to say, get some of these costs, as such. Where's your motion there now, Bart? Mine got shuffled in under the pack. Location of a police department facility at the former Millsap's automobile dealership at a cost of buying the entire property, including the corner property. And those of you who were not at our work session, we had a very great presentation. We had an enthusiastic presentation, probably the most enthusiastic presentation I've ever seen an architect give. The estimated property and the cost, the acquisition is approximately $1 million, and the cost of construction is about $5 million. A total cost of $6 million. Location number 2, location of a police department facility on the former Coca-Cola bottling site. The exact cost of the property is $1,488,000, approximately $488,000 more than the Millsap's site. I might indicate also on the Millsap site, by buying the entire corner, the architect is not proposing the use of the Millsap's building itself. This could be used later as a bus terminal and be that we had to turn down previously because we did not have the money for the buses. We chose to put the money into the buses. Location of the police department on the Stark property road. Yes, it's a little cheaper. It would price out approximately $5,700,000 with a savings of approximately $355,000. But we've got to build a $3 million road. And we have to build other services there to get there to the site. That's on free property. That just doesn't work. Estimated acquisition cost of the property, he's willing to give that property, and I would give it too if I could get a $3 million road put through the middle of my properties. We have to find out how we're going to justify paying for that. A vote for the municipal court facility to be constructed in a separate building. That's an excellent proposal. We are looking at the properties on North Lafayette Street, where the old Trailways bus shop was, or bus station was located, on the east side of North Lafayette Street. Every property owner has agreed to sell to us, and there's a price in which they've agreed to, each one to a total cost of approximately $350,000 for the entire section there. The electric department has monies in this bonding indebtedness that has already been passed that can be used to, say, purchase the property, build a new 2-story facility on the corner of Highway 182 and Lafayette Street. This is an area that needs lots of help. Once we begin to say designate help in these particular areas, such as the corner of Lampkin Street and Jackson Street, with a new 2-story plaza and police station, it brings our civic building to the downtown area. It brings our court facility to a much-needed, tired area of our community within a reasonable price. One of the biggest problems that we had in regard to, say, trying to find a location with a combination of the courts and the police station was parking facilities for the court facility. We have a 1-acre parking lot that is underutilized on the corner of Jefferson and Jackson Street that fits in very nicely. If you look at your proposals, it gives us approximately 66 parking places. The rest of it is put in place on site. And believe it or not, folks, we've got 120 places. I would like to point out again, the 120 places is a significant amount of downtown parking for that particular section, considering the fact that if you take all the parking on Main Street, both sides, and go from the Chester Hotel to the electric department, that only is 80 parking places. So yes, we will have significant parking places for a court facility that would be located on the Lafayette Street area. Estimate cost of the court facility would be approximately $1.2 million.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
that is a wonderful example of exactly what I'm talking about. And you're wanting to promote and get this done. You've informed probably the people sitting here more than they've known about this project in the last 3 months. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. This process will get information out there to people and also eliminate any possible opposition over location once we have to pass our bond issues to build this facility. Wonderful example right there. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
Alderman Davis, how does having a non-bonding public opinion poll increase the amount of information that's in the public space?
Because our mayor's going to be out there being the community visionary that he is, touting the wonderful things about the downtown location in an effort to make sure that it passes at referendum.
I could do that if we decide on the location. I could probably get 65% of the people to vote for it with being a community visionary, Mr. Davis.
And you're a good one at that, Mr. Mayor. I'm simply saying there are people out there that if it went to a non-binding referendum, they would live with whatever decision was made. Whereas they would immediately cast their vote against a bond issue if we were to decide as an administration to put it downtown right now, not, for example. And what I'm saying is, whenever you go to a bond issue election, you're always going to have a segment of the population that will vote against that bond issue simply because they don't want their taxes going up, and it doesn't matter what you're voting on, it's just there. And so the key thing is to try to not increase that number over something like the location. And in my opinion, and it's simply my opinion, this is a way to help settle that and eliminate that from that side of the equation when it comes to bond issue referendum. Like I said, I'm not endorsing this motion tonight to endorse downtown or not downtown. I just want to build a facility. I just want to pass the bond issue referendum. That's all I want.
Call the question.
All for the question?
Question's been called, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor of the motion, please show by raising your hand. All those opposed? It passes by one vote. I will make a decision on whether I'll veto this or not. This brings us to the next item, I think, is the department heads, isn't it?
So report from the Budget Committee, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
Mr. Mayor and Board, Alderwoman Self, Alderman Mills, and myself have several items to report from the Budget Committee. The first is just some information about sales tax and restaurant tax collections. The final numbers came in from 2005, and that's a calendar year that showed a 10% sales tax increase over the calendar year 2004. That is a significant increase. And in our restaurant tax, the final numbers came in for the 2005 calendar year versus the 2004 of an 8% increase. And speaking of that 2% tax, this is the first year that we earned over $1 million from that tax to be reinvested within the community in our parks, Conventions Bureau, and the university and OCEDA. As part of our report tonight, we did meet with the Starkville Electric Department, and we invited the TVA representative to come to that meeting so that we could discuss the decision that the TVA board made concerning the 9.95% increase. Mr. Hadaway will be presenting some of that information later tonight, but we pushed to find a way to limit the impact of that increase. And simply because the cost of the electric that's provided from TVA is such a great portion of what is ultimately translated into your bill, we didn't find a way for us to avoid passing on that increase. More specifically, if we tried to avoid passing on that increase from TVA, it would impact our capital spending on infrastructure, things like the upgrades out South Montgomery to improve the brownouts and other items. And we felt reluctantly that the only thing we could do is to recommend that passage, and that would translate to approximately a 7.74% increase for residential customers, and we'd recommend that happen on April the 1st. And later in our agenda, Mr. Hadaway will present additional items and be available for comments, and at that time we can make the motion to consider that. The Budget Committee also heard from Starkville in Motion. Starkville in Motion is a community-based organization, and they've been working to put together a grant proposal from MDOT. This would be for building a multi-use trail that would connect, in essence, Lynn Lane and the Sportsplex and the Key Park all the way to the university. What's exciting about this grant from MDOT is that the matching component from both the university and the city is not in specific straight cash, but instead is an in-kind contribution. And we're working with Mr. Webb and the city to determine what exactly that in-kind contribution can be. Starkville Motion will be here at the board at our next board meeting to present that. And the reason why we've wanted to entertain that and hear that is the grant cycle happens once every 5 years. And so if we miss on this opportunity to receive this grant money, it'll be another 5 years before we can leverage that type of proposal. I think I'm on number 4. The Budget Committee has established a permanent meeting schedule going forward. And we'll be meeting on Friday afternoons, the Tuesday, before the Tuesday board meeting. And we'll, of course, continue to notice those meetings, but we wanted to get into a regular schedule, especially as budget season, believe it or not, is already upon us. And lastly, we would ask that this board at our next board meeting finalize its decision in relation to the courts and their proposal for a change in their staffing, an additional staff person. We need to make a decision on this. This is now going on a month since it was originally proposed. The Budget Committee has already made our recommendations to this board, and we'd ask that on the 21st that we provide an answer back to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you go ahead and move on to your next one, and that's the smoking ordinance, unless someone's got questions pertaining to the committee report.
A quick update from the Smoking Ordinance Committee. This was a committee established by the board of a wide-ranging community group. We have three aldermen, Alderman Davis, Alderman Corey, and myself. We included two of the proponents of a smoking ordinance. We included two restaurant owners and also a representative from the MSU Student Association. We've been working since that time, and at this time the advisory committee has finalized its work in drafting a comprehensive indoor smoking ban for public places. And I say finalized, and I'll put that in quotes just for a second, or at least qualify. The city attorney now has the work that has come out of that group, and he'll be putting together and basically putting it in legal language what we were trying to accomplish to present back to our committee that final draft recommendation to come back to the board. And once the committee has reviewed that, possibly electronically, we would then present that to the board and, of course, publish it for its review. And it would be our goal at this time to have a public hearing on this ordinance at the 21st board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
I'll just say that it has been a process that has worked, bringing together members from across the community. You would think that we would have a lot of disagreements, but in fact, time and time again, we've reached consensus on a number of issues, and I think everyone went into it with the idea that if Starkville were to choose to have this ordinance, it would need to be a successful one, and the restaurant owners and the Restaurant Association are to be commended, to have sat at the table to help make that happen, and the same for the other members of the committee. And I look forward to having a more formal report on the 21st.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Brule, is this yours with consideration approval of the contract with Telecom? Is that you, right?
I'll be glad to go ahead and open up on that.
All right.
As chairman of the technology committee, our committee, which consists of myself, Alderman Davis, and Alderman Cox, had an opportunity to listen to a presentation by the Telecom Audit Group. They're an organization that works with municipalities, counties, and even school boards. And what they do is they look at previous phone charges and look at instances where those groups have been overcharged. And then they also continue to work with cities, counties, municipalities, whatever, to look at ways to reduce existing charges. The fees that they charge are based purely on what they manage to save, which means if they happen not to save us anything, then we're not charged at all. And so what they would do is they'd first do an audit of our phone bills. They look at some of our past charges, and their rate is 25% of any savings from any previous past charges. So if they save us $1,000 that we get back, they charge $250. In addition, they work with us for a year, and we'll, like I said before, we'll look at ways that they can additionally save us money on existing charges. And I believe it's 50% of any savings off of existing charges. And then after that year is up, we just continue to save whatever they've managed to set up for us.
And if I may, one of the things that we did do, a couple of lines were discovered. We went back and looked at some of our phone bills, and we did discover a couple of lines that we're being charged for that we initiated the process to collect back on those that would keep these folks from collecting on something that we discovered. So we've gone through and done our due diligence to make sure that we've covered everything we know to cover. They also can keep us from being charged tariffs that sometimes creep into your bill, so that's some of what they look at as well. And y'all considered this last time we were waiting for Mr. Favors. Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, you not only approved it, but you had the Attorney General of the state approve it as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then in addition, on the back of the presentation you may have received is a list of counties, cities, and school boards that have currently or previously used their services and the amount that they have saved. And the gentleman that spoke to us said just from just a preliminary look, he already sees ways he can save the city money. And so I really see this as a win-win situation, and it's got approval from our city attorney. And so I would like to move that we approve the contract with Telecom Audit Group for telecommunications analysis.
We have a motion. Do you have a second? Do you want to say something?
No, I was waiting to see if Matt wanted to second the motion or not.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. With the exception. Brings us down to the airport. Rodney, you here? Rodney Green? Rodney Lincoln? I believe you have two items.
Yes, sir. The first one is the proposal for consultant engineer for Bryan Field and future related projects. The board last night met and with the evaluation papers evaluated the two proposals that were received, and you have the average totals before you.
Rodney, I think we're kind of perhaps looking at each other because our board member who serves with y'all has stepped out of the room, and I expect we're going to hear from him on.
What was the other item we got?
Go ahead to your next item.
Okay, it's for two of the airport board members and myself to attend the MAA conference in Philadelphia, Mississippi, May 17th through the 19th. And at this.
We have a motion to approve that. We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor say yea.
Yea.
Nays. Passes.
The airport board comfortable with Clearwater as consulting engineer?
Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion that we accept the proposal. BC, would you like to say anything about this consulting engineer proposal as our member to the airport board?
Just 1 second. We received tonight on the table, did we not? It was not in the packet, the airport board's recommendation relative to consulting engineers for Bryan Field. They have evaluated the two proposals that were received, one from Clearwater Consultants, one from Wagner Engineering. The weighting scores on the evaluations indicated that Clearwater Consultants rated the highest. And has a motion been made?
Waiting on you.
I would then recommend we move approval of the airport board's recommendation for designation of Clearwater Consultants as the consulting engineer for Georgia and Bryan Field.
I'll second the motion.
Got a second? All those in favor say yea.
Yea.
Opposes? Nay. Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you.
Building codes and planning.
You have one item on the agenda, Mayor and Board. This is kind of a good neighbor courtesy policy, but we have received a request through the Building Inspectors Association of Mississippi to assist on the coast as far as writing building permits and doing imagery inspections. There are approximately 25 different cities that over the period of time are sending assistance down primarily to the Waveland, Pass Christian, Long Beach, and Bay St. Louis area. And I bring you tonight a request to send our inspector, Ken Honeycutt, for the week of March 20th to 24th to travel to Long Beach to help on building permits and inspections during that time. The money is in the travel budget for the inspection department, and he will be provided a stipend of $150 to cover expenses on that. They will provide a place to sleep, showers, and meals. And I'm recommending that Mr. Honeycutt go because his family is from the coast and will have a place to be there. So I request that your permission send Mr. Honeycutt on that. Also, at the same time, I would like to report to this board that since we've instituted the code enforcement project, we have covered approximately 374 cases, of which we only have 96 that are not resolved. We are looking at some legislation to bring to you to speed up the process because of the fact that right now we are within 120 days sometimes of addressing junked cars and dilapidated buildings and tracing titles and so forth. And also in relationship to that, we would like very much the board's serious consideration of the possibility of developing an environmental court with the city of Starkville to address issues with the abandoned cars, bad buildings, litter, junk, and so forth. This could be handled within the framework of our present system without a real significant change in personnel. Bring it to it, we would issue citation for these particular things, and it would be adjudicated by the city courts. Would also be an additional source of funds. So I wanted to bring you, that's where we're going. Also, for your consideration, we have a little 380-page book, which I've tried to incorporate every code related to land development in the city, either existing or proposed, which I would hopefully ask for your indulgence in looking at. There's a lot of new things that have been added, brought up to date, but more than anything else, it will all be together, both in one book and online. If anybody wants to develop in Starkville, this is where they will go on. And I think it's something that's very much needed. And I've had a very helpful intern from Mississippi State that has just really done yeoman labor in putting this together. Also, didn't you have a question, Vice Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to ask Mr. Romo a question, please, sir.
Well, ask me.
I do have the floor.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Romo, just one point of inquiry, please. I want to make sure I understand the city's policy on mobile homes. I saw some correspondence in my box about the location of a mobile home, or however you want to find a utility structure in an R1 zone that's in a backyard while the home is being renovated. My experience on this board, there have been numerous and repeated requests of the board over the 12 to 13 years I've been here. And I've had numerous constituents who've inquired about locating a mobile home in a backyard of an R1 zone or at the location. And the board has always had a steadfast policy of not wanting to do it because the problem it sets a precedent. If you do it for one, you do it for all. Now, the location in question that you and I talked about this evening, you mentioned that a variance could be done. It will go to the Board of Adjustment Appeals, and it does that, then it does not require board approval. And I just make sure I understand, I want to get some understanding about the board in its official session tonight, because it is my opinion that that is not a variance. You know, if we're going to put a mobile home in R1 zone, that is going to be an exception to the zoning ordinance. And even with the recent motion that was made and approved by the board, stemming from the motion of my colleague from Ward 1, that all zoning matters originate in the planning and zoning, and they ultimately come to the board. So I think, from my understanding of the board's and the city's zoning ordinances, that if you're gonna try to put a mobile home in an R1 or any type zone that does not fit there, it's gonna require an exception. That's, in my opinion, of course, I stand to be corrected, but it's not a variance. So I've had many constituents who have come here on Babylon Road, on Fire Station Road, the Rock Hill community that has somebody who had their home burned down. And they, and we, once we did the classification of that area, we could not go back and allow that person to come into that location. So I want to make sure we're clear, because if we're going to say that this location can have a variance, I'm going to send everybody to you and tell them that let's make sure we got a precedent here. It's working according to the city planner. We want to go to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals, but it's my thinking that that is not a variance. So I'll make sure we're clear here. When you start talking about mobile homes in these neighborhoods, you're talking about filling this boardroom up. We have had many situations where mobile homes have tried to be located in a residential area, and irregardless of whether the neighbors agree, but that does not comply with the zoning ordinance. So I just want to make sure we're clear, and I want to make sure that if I'm wrong, I want you to correct me while we're in this official meeting tonight, because, if that is your interpretation, I'm going to expect it to happen in Ward 6. Then there are going to be people in other wards going to come here. They just want to get a variance, but I don't see how this is a variance. But I want you to speak to that matter and correct me if I'm wrong.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I would like to address this from several comments. This is not a mobile home. I have looked at it. This is an RV, a recreational vehicle. It has been on the property evidently for a long time. It has a roof over it. It has been covered with skirting around the wheels. There's nobody in it. It is parked in the rear setback. I had the same concerns that you did too, because I call this an accessory structure. It is part of the main household, but it is not essential to living. And in the ordinance, general provisions, it says it is the intent of this ordinance that accessory structures shall not include living quarters. That's the reason why I felt that it should be denied. However, the lady who has it has some sort of chemical-related illness, and she has this travel trailer that she wants to live in while they remodel her house, which includes new air conditioning jugs and changing it to handicapped accessible standards. This is what she is presenting. This was brought to me, and I have discussed this with Alderman Cox on this. Also, in looking at it, we look at the powers of the Board of Adjustments. It's in the Starkville, what it describes, and it powers and duties of the Board of Adjustments. And it addresses special exceptions and variances. And under the special exception, to hear and decide upon only such special exceptions as the Board of Adjustments is specifically authorized to pass on by the terms of the ordinance. To decide such questions are as involved in determining whether special exceptions should be granted, and to grant special exceptions with such conditions and safeguards as are appropriate under this ordinance, or to deny special exceptions when not in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. Now, to follow through on what guidelines the Board of Adjustments look at in granting a special exception, that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and the same conditions are not applicable to other land, structures, and buildings in the same district. That literal interpretation of the provisions of this ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under terms of the ordinance. That the special conditions and circumstances have not resulted from the action of the applicant, and that granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other land, structures, or buildings in the same district. In granting any variance, the Board of Adjustment shall have the authority to prescribe appropriate conditions and safeguards in conformity with the ordinance. Violations of such conditions and safeguards, when made a part of the terms under which the variance is granted, shall be deemed a violation of the ordinance, and under no circumstances shall the Board of Adjustment grant a variance to permit a use other than a use permitted generally or by special exception in the district involved.
Just in the interest of time, Mr. Roma.
I've got one other sentence, and then this will refer to the powers of the board in this issue. That the Board of Adjustments hear this and send their recommendations to this board. I stand corrected on that. I told you this stood alone. But they send a recommendation through their minutes to this board, which the board can then elect to pass on.
But you had earlier represented that it did.
Yes, I told you wrong.
Yes, sir.
So this, the Board of Adjustments to me is the hearing of this particular issue. And to send a recommendation to y'all.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Rumble? Do we have a motion to send Mr. Honeycutt to Long Beach?
Second.
All those in favor say yea.
Yay.
All those opposed? Thank you, Mr. Rumble. Office of the City Clerk.
I have, the first item is the claims docket and the financials. The claims docket for February and the financials for January. And I verified through the, my accounts payable clerk that all claims presented are accompanied with the proper documents, and I recommend that the board approve.
So moved, Mr. Mayor. Second.
We have a motion and a second that we approve the claims docket. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay.
And the financials are in your packet, and I did kind of put that motion with the claims docket. And that, if you're in your package, you'll see the resignation letter from my accounts payable, Ms. Katie Chandler. And with her resignation, it leaves the clerk's office short-staffed again. And what I'm asking is that, I'm requesting is, if I could be allowed to advertise for that position and perhaps fill that position before she actually leaves in order to have a smoother transition for the new person.
How long of a transition period are you looking for?
I was hopeful of 2 months, but whatever the board is in agreement with would be good.
Do we have the money to carry this extra person for an extra 2 months, Mr. Vice Chair?
The Budget Committee considered this request 2 meetings ago and agree with the recommendation to go ahead and hire it in advance and having the appropriate funds to do so.
Then based on the recommendations of the Budget Committee, so moved.
Second.
Motion and second that we advertise for someone for Ms. Katie Chandler's position. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Passes.
And the last item I have is the cemetery maintenance mowing contract. And I recommend accepting the bid submitted by Circle J Lawn Care in the amount of $950 per cut for the Oddfellow Cemetery mowing contract. We want to include a maximum number of cuts, with the growing season having 2 to 3 cuts per month.
Every 10 days. Maybe every 10 days.
Maybe every 10 days, yeah.
The Cemetery Board and Ms. McCarthy, everybody's happy with this bid proposal and service provisions?
Yes, the Circle J has been the one that's been with
That's
us.
who
And I recommend the board accept the proposal.
I would move we accept one bid, Circle J Lawn Care.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak to this motion before
You
we
certainly
go?
may.
I want it to be known that I am going to vote in support of this, but I also want the O&O committee to meet with the other Oddfellow Cemetery on Highway 182 or Martin Luther King Drive. They have asked to be considered, and I want the O&O committee to meet with them and listen to them and make a recommendation to this board on what we will or will not do to assist the other Oddfellow Cemetery.
Mr. Chairman, we need sometime soon.
Had you thought about letting the budget committee look at it?
It's already in the, already made.
It's already in the O&O committee. The
Well, they don't
request has
ever
already
meet,
gone to them.
Because some of us work.
That's what
No,
they call
we
it.
hadn't got to the budget committee. We went to the O&O committee.
Mr. Chef, I certainly support it, and I'm going to encourage the distinguished chairman to schedule a meeting as soon as possible.
Some of that committee.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Boyd.
Electric Department? Yeah, how you doing tonight?
I have two items for the board's consideration. Item number one is to request authorization to raise the standby call-out weekly pay from $80 to $150. We've gone back into the board minutes, and it appears as though the last time that any adjustment was made as far as call-out pay for the police, electric and water departments, it was about a little over 12 years ago, or approximately 12 years ago. And we're requesting that we be allowed to raise this standby pay for cost of living reasons, if at all possible.
Mr. Hathaway, I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention and knowing that there are other departments that are not currently on the agenda that could potentially be affected by that proposal, and we would end up with an equity issue internally. I'd recommend, and would do so in the form of a motion, that we would refer this request and the other ones dealing with on-call pay to the Budget Committee to be returned to this board on the 21st of March with our recommendation. Second.
Motion with a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Passes.
Second item I have for your consideration, Mayor and Board, is on February 13th, I attended a meeting in Nashville, which was held by TVA, and at that meeting, TVA revealed that they were going to have a rate adjustment effective April 1st this year. This rate adjustment was due strictly to problems in procurement of supplies for use and generation of electricity. Especially after Hurricane Katrina, prices have gone really out of sight, and TVA has absorbed quite a bit of that, but finds that it's going to be impossible for the long duration to be able to sustain that cost that this fuel cost is costing them. In your board packets, you'll find a memo from me that I was asked to go through and figure what it would actually cost the electric department as far as absorbing any part of this rate increase. And what I did was figured it on our net cash income. It pretty much lays out the problems that we would have in absorbing any of the costs reflected on this rate adjustment or any other rate adjustment. is pending basically on our bonding situation and being able to honor our covenants on these bonds. On page 3, well, actually page 4, you'll see our cash reserves. As of June the 30th, in our restricted bond fund, we had approximately 3.1 million. And our general fund, or capital what I call capital outlay, was 1.9 for a total of $5,053,000. The restricted bond funds were used strictly for the projects that are listed on the second half of that page. Some of these projects have been completed, but not all of them. We are in the process of, for instance, completing the SCADA system. We still have to do the underground project at the Upper Crossing subdivision and our feeder down on South Montgomery Street. These should be able to give you some information on the next page of how our rates pretty much fare with our neighboring utilities. At this time, I would request that this TVA rate adjustment be approved to be in effect April 1st of this year.
Was this not recommended by the budget committee to approve this, or did y'all ever get around to that?
We did, I think the actual terminology was we reluctantly recommend it.
Didn't have any choice.
And I would do that in the form of a motion.
Do you have a second?
I second.
Any further discussion?
I've just got a question for Ed. Since we're talking about our bonds in the electric department, how much, once we get done with these projects and everything, how much do we still have from that, the FY04 revenue bond? Still have $2 million?
Yes, that we have not borrowed, that the previous board allocated.
Right, and that's unobligated monies?
That's correct.
Not to a specific project?
That's correct.
Then, when you talk about, the revenue does not support issuance of bonds, well, I guess I'm skipping back to page, what you have numbered as 1. The last line on page 1, and I guess you're talking about an 80% pass-through. And when you say that last sentence, revenue does not support issuance of bonds for new office, I thought that $2 million left over out of that FY04 revenue bond was for the new office building.
It was. $2 million were for the new office building, but the funding, in other words, we would have to pick up 10% out of our operating revenue, and that would prohibit us from having the 120% coverage specified by the bond covenants.
Right. So what you're saying is, I guess I'm just having problems understanding it says projected cash income for FY07 will allow bond payments and covenants to be met on existing bonds.
Right, on existing bonds, but it would prohibit us from borrowing the other $2 million.
I thought we had already, I thought the original revenue bond issue was up to $5 million. Have we just not borrowed the other money?
We've not borrowed the other
Okay,
money.
we've just borrowed.
Yeah,
What,
correct.
okay, we didn't get it all in one, okay.
Other questions? Do we have a motion?
Yes, sir.
We have a second?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, say by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Let's do a hand count. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand.
Thank you, Mayor Board.
Thank you.
Brings down to engineering and streets.
board have two items tonight. In your packet, you will find a request from Little South Communications to place an underground fiber cable along the right-of-way at Pinecrest and Old Highway 12. That's just coming off of New Highway 12, going across Pinecrest to Old Highway 12 to serve the new housing units along Old Highway 12. They will be within the last 5 feet, or the outside 5 feet of our right-of-way as allowed by law. And they, of course, will put it in with one call so that they do not interfere with any other utilities in the area. We recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Thank you. Second item is just the opposite. Basically, it's a release of a lien or a easement. Several years ago, and this is kind of housekeeping here, we had a sewer line going across a development, and when the property was sold, the sewer line that we had an easement on along was found to be across a lot. The developer at that time requested that he be allowed to relocate the sewer line and the easement to the property line of his proposed lot, which he has done and given us the actual new easement. And we're requesting that we release the existing easement, which no longer has a sewer line in it.
Where is this exactly, Bill?
This is in, well, I don't know what it's called, Middle Crossing. It's in the Upper Crossing area.
We're close to that Grand Canyon ditch.
I think it's right off of John Calvin Street, in that area. He is essentially relocated and reaffirmed the new easement, and we recommend release of this one.
I would move the city approve release of the easement to Charles Morgan Construction Company.
Second? Motion with a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Thank you. Fire Department?
Mr. Mayor, I would move approval of the authorization for fire chief and his truck committee to travel to Alpine, Wisconsin for a pre-construction meeting with manufacturing engineers, noting that this trip was specified in the specs and also is at no cost to the city of Starkville.
We have a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Police Department? You on a roll here or something?
Chief, I'm waiting for my colleague from Ward 1 to make the motion. I do have a couple questions.
All right. Item number 1 is request authorization to allow Sergeant Fultz, Laffoon, and Officers Garnett and Bennett to attend the out-of-state armorers school at Block in Smyrna, Georgia. That's where the firearms company Block is located in the United States.
Chief, is it the intention that these 4 officers would attend the training and then return and offer training to the other personnel?
Actually, this is not an instructor school, it's an armorer school. The handguns we carry are Blocks, which are Austrian-made semi-automatic pistols that are highly technical. This is the primary self-defense weapon of all officers. This armorer's course is a guns mechanics course, is what it does. It authorizes and allows the officers to be certified in repairing the weapons and putting parts into them and upgrades and things like this. And we try and have enough officers throughout the department where if a gun fails on duty, we can fix it there, since it is a basic necessity too. And that's the reason that we do it that way. But it's not something that we would be certified to teach to other officers. It's something that you have to have enough people capable of having an expertise and knowledge on duty, hopefully all the time, where if a gun fails, you can fix it.
I understood from the packet that this was a 5-day and 4-night out of the city, does that, we frequently talk about how short-staffed we are, does that create staffing issues for the city?
Well, we
overall?
planned ahead for this school. It's a highly technical school. It's difficult to get into. The demand for it is so great. And we planned ahead for this, so it is a budget expense. It's something we feel like is pretty basic to our needs.
And last question, the question that's been asked to me is, why do we need to send 4? Is there a possibility we could send 2? And I think you started to address that, but that's the biggest concern.
What you're trying to do is, we don't have extra weapons, and if we did, the only way you can carry a weapon is to go to the range and qualify with it. You have to be qualified on the individual weapon that is issued to you at the time for liability purposes. So what we're trying to do is have enough armorers with equipment and extra parts spread out throughout the shifts where if a gun goes down, hopefully it won't, but they can repair it then. And gun failure is something that is rare, but it's detected in several different ways. When you check your weapon, when you load it, when you unload it, things like that, you don't actually have to have a discharge such as on duty to have a gun failure. This addresses all manners of a number of things, including site replacement, checking magazines and things like that to make sure the weapon is functional. It's a life-saving measure is what it is.
And you say this is basically a maintenance of the weapon?
That's what it's an armorer's school. It's a gunsmith school. This teaches you how to work on blocks and put them together and take them apart and repair them. It's a gunsmith school for this particular weapon. That's what an armorer's school is.
Okay, I have a real problem with the basic meaning of cleaning and maintaining this weapon when we've been using these weapons, how long now? 15 years?
I don't quite understand your question.
Well, in 10 years, we've been using this Glock automatic weapon.
Yes, a little over 10.
And we don't have facilities that, like the Law Enforcement Academy in Jackson, that don't teach anything about the Glock pistol.
No, so you have to go to Smyrna, Georgia, where Glock headquarters is in order to become a Glock armorer.
I understand that would be going to a specialist, but what facilities do the law enforcement academies locally in the state of Mississippi, they don't teach anything about this particular type of maintenance of the Glock pistol?
No, so they don't teach you Glock armorer's course.
If we sent one guy to the school over there, can he not come back and cover this with each individual policeman?
No, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I move approve this request.
Second.
We have a second.
Yep.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Request authorization to advertise, that's you, I think, David.
Yes, sir.
I just going back to the consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Next item, David.
Next item would be, I believe, 3 and 4 have been referred to the budget committee, is that correct? And then number 5 would be authorization for out-of-state travel for computer systems manager Al Quinn, Court Administrator Tony Brook, Sergeant LaFoon, and Sergeant Word to attend the PPS User Group Conference in Bossier City, Louisiana. This basically is the course that keeps us updated in our current computer systems and how they relate to the police and court. It's the basic backbone of the systems that we use. It enables us to keep upgraded on the equipment and for the officers to, in fact, instruct other officers in what the latest technology is that we need to utilize in the computer systems. This is a budgeted expense.
Chief, same question, I guess, as before, that I appreciate the need for Mr. Quinn to go as well as for Mr. Rook. Can you explain why we need 2 police officers as opposed to just 1?
Right. course, we run 24/7, 365, and oftentimes you'll have problems if the computer's not functioning properly or an officer having a particular question. So we try and have people available to school them through difficulties. And if one officer that is schooling that is sick or off or on vacation and not accessible, in particular at night, it makes it difficult to get over with Al or Tony. And of course, Al is the overall computer administrator. He's here during the day. And Tony primarily works on the court end of it, which is a portion of PTS, but it's not the system end that we use in the police service.
So
That's the reason.
this having two officers instead of just one is because of the 24-hour operation?
Well, it helps in having those officers available to help teach the other officers to overcome problems that they may have.
Mayor, I move approval.
We have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
And Chief, I realize that you had the two travel requests, but I'm hoping that we can get to the point where we look at travel, and I realize that you had strong explanations for both of the requests that you had. But I think
Like a frivolous request.
absolutely, and it's the intention of, anyway, to look at travel very strongly, and certainly appreciate the presentation that you made.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Appreciate it.
Public services?
Good evening. I've only got one item, since we moved the other one to the budget committee. Requesting approval to advertise for sealed bids to rehab and refurbish the Curry Street filter plant. It's up off Curry Street in North Starkville. I missed my budget estimate just a little bit. I only missed it by $317,000, so I underestimated somewhat. But on your sheet in the packet, we've laid out, I got with Charles and Bill, and we've laid out 6 equipment and equipment upgrade items till FY 06-07, and then there's a couple of revenue windfalls that were unexpected that we can use. And then also we can move some money from about 6 line items in our capital improvement budget to cover the expense. So with that said, I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Needs to be done.
Yes, sir.
I would
Badly.
simply move that we approve authorization for bids to rebuild, rehab Curry Street pressure filter plant for drinking water.
Second.
Several seconds. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Sanitation?
Good evening, Mayor and Mayor. I was instructed by the Chief Administrative Officer to give you an update on the sanitation department. I believe you have in your packet 3 to 4 pages with a summary, a brief summary of the things that we've been doing and I've implemented. I would like to, first of all, concerning the contract with the GTPDD, which is the Golden Triangle Department, Development Department. And can go about and let you know what's going on with them. Why it's taken so long? It seems as if it's taken so long, but it hasn't really, because each of the occupying families, we have to make sure they live there. The ones that had lived there before them, they had a bill. We had to locate them. We had to go through the proper procedures of giving them out papers, finding out the exact amounts. And now we're in the process of taking them to court. I gave out a check in the amount of $2,592. We've already received that back in the month of February. $2,107.91. The those with the $2,500, which is the court fee, we will be prosecuting at least 48 more people and getting the monies in. So we are in the process of collecting monies. This is additional monies, the sanitation department. While looking through my, the 4-page summary, are there any questions that you have?
Questions from any members of the board?
Ms. Boyd, really appreciate the update and the strong work being done on the collection. Just as a comment, under the goals that you've listed, and you've got some great ones, as well as the accomplishments that you made have been much appreciated. The one question, and I don't expect you to be able to detail the plan that you have for distributing the garbage bags, but we just ask that we get plenty of notice, because that's a pretty sensitive issue, especially in my ward, where the theft primarily occurred, and just would like just a good amount of notice on that, and possibly even consultation with the board before that's presented.
Ms. Boyd,
Sir, we already have, can I answer his question?
Ms. Boyd, isn't it customary and usual for the garbage bags to be issued every year in April and every year in October?
Yes, sir.
So we don't normally deviate from that, do we?
No, sir. As a matter of fact, I was getting ready to answer
I understand, but I want to make those comments.
Alderman Cox's question. We've already placed in the paper, when we will be delivering out. It will be the first and second. I don't know why I'm so nervous. I know each and every one of them. It'll be the first, not April 1st, it'll be the 8th and the 9th. That's on a Saturday and Sunday. That we'll be delivering out. The next weekend after that, we'll be delivering out. We will start putting it in the paper. I believe it started this week. The South is sending out in the paper to the, all of the papers, and also to the paper. And it's gonna run, and stating that we're going to be delivering out until May the 12th.
So that's what that plan is what you meant when you talked about the more efficient and less vulnerable. Okay, because I heard a different presentation or idea floated, and I just wanted greater clarification, but it sounds like a good plan.
Okay, now, here it is, right here, I didn't give it to y'all. Please publish in the Round Town section on March 9th, 13th, and 16th, 20th, and 23rd, 27th, and April 6th. The City of Starkville Sanitation Department will be delivering garbage bags to residential customers on the weekends of April 8th, 9th, 15th, and 16th. Apartment complex owners or managers are asked to call Sharon Boyd or Revenant Southwood between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. and arrange delivery of tenants to a secure location. Distribution to all residential customers, apartment dwellers, and businesses will be completed by May 12th. That includes missed bags. Any more questions, please?
Thank you, ma'am. This brings us down to executive session on a personnel matter and with potential litigation. We need to go into a closed session or discuss going into executive session. Why? I don't need a 5-minute break. I told you I'd give you some salt. We said this morning. I'm down with that.